Cool. G'day guys, how you going? Where is the Figma evangelist? Is he in the room somewhere? I just wanted to apologise in advance. I'm no Figma expert. I'm just a guy having a crack here. I'm a bit of a Figma fanboy, and I'm here to talk about basically why I love Figma. And maybe there's something in here that is valuable to you. This is the second time I've made the mistake of going after Buzz, speaking after Buzz. He definitely he killed it on that last talk. And so, yeah, he's set me up here. So, so I'm going to do a similar thing and kind of indulge myself a little bit here, but I guess a bit about me. Over the last 8-ish years or so, I've been a product designer, and I've been lucky enough to work with some really, really great companies. I worked for a few companies beforehand, but really got my start at Airtasker, and when they were sort of really in their formative years. And went in as their first design hire and was with the company for about 3.5 years. Learnt a lot from some really great people there, worked with Philippe there, and he taught me a bunch of stuff as well. And so, yeah, worked at Airtasker for a while, left there and went out to do my own thing, tried to do that for about 6 months and ran out of money. So then I went and worked for Pocketbook for a while. And kind of went in there to just freshen things up. They got acquired and they just wanted some sort of fresh design eyes on their product. So I worked there for about 6 months and redesigned about 70% of that product. And then a couple of things in between, but have now landed at a company called Ailo, which is a prop tech. And I'm there just as a senior designer. I've been there for about 2 years. Cool, I also run a little studio on the side. I don't know if you could call it a studio, it's at least just, that's what my invoices say. But it's there for 2 reasons, and that is because I have some clients on the side that I work for. So Soho, a company called Tell Me Baby and Freely, are just a few of the clients that I've got through the studio. And then I also have this idea that I started a while ago. I've been teaching myself to code Ruby on Rails. If there's any engineers in the room, they'll probably tell me that that's not the language to go for. But I set myself challenges every 3 months and try and build a new business and see if it can take off or something like that. And so I built a business called Adventure Squad, one called Should-I.Rent, and one called Woodworks.club. If you're wondering, I do a little bit of woodworking. That's why I built that site. So, cool. I also want to introduce you to my dog Scout. So he's a 1.5-year-old Labrador cross Mastiff. And when he's not helping me design things, his favourite things to do are lay on his back in the sun, play with his rope toys, and generally just destroy anything he can find. And the reason that I introduced you to Scout is because I also work remotely. And I love working remote because it means I can spend time with Scout. I can kind of do things at my own pace and kind of do the things that are important to me. So, giving family, friends, my dog, exercise, those kinds of things a place in my life as well instead of commuting 3 hours a day. And so between walking this guy and working on side projects, my favorite thing about working remote is that I can juggle all of that stuff and still kind of live a life that I'm pretty happy with. So getting started with remote work, so this kicked off working for a company called Soho, which I mentioned earlier. Did about 6 months with those guys, but they're based in Singapore, so was working sort of back and forth with the team over there, and that kind of put me on the journey. And then I loved it so much that when I moved over to Ailo, even though the office is based in Sydney, I work remotely out at my house. We have an office in Sydney and in Melbourne, so we're already kind of slightly distributed, but nothing too crazy. Cool, so what's so special about Figma? Why are we sort of talking about this tool? About half of the people in the room probably already know all this stuff, so just hopefully there's something engaging here, but I really like Figma. I've been using it since I worked at Pocketbook, so a couple of years now, I think 3.5 or so. And I think when you're choosing a design tool, there's a lot of things that are worth considering. A lot of the things that Buzz spoke about are really important and 100% you need to sort of think about when you're choosing a tool. So for me, it comes down to a couple of things. So I've got cost and practicality. So my previous workflow was I would use Sketch, I would use Dropbox, I would use Zeppelin, and I would use InVision. Sketch being my primary tool. It's the tool that I was kind of doing the heavy lifting in from a design standpoint. Dropbox was for syncing files and so on. Zeppelin for developer handoff, and Envision for sort of prototyping. And when I made the change over to Figma, I sort of made the decision that I wanted to use all of Figma's functionality. And so I stripped back all of those tools and I just moved into Figma. And I guess just as an added bonus, assuming you have a subscription to the base plan of every one of those apps, you'll annually save about 544 USD. It's only in US dollars because that's what their websites advertise and I couldn't be bothered calculating it. That's right, exactly. So the first thing that I really love about Figma is this collaborative design aspect. It's obviously the thing that they sell themselves on. And the first time I used Figma with another person, I was blown away. Being able to work together with another person and have them make comments or draw things or contribute to the work in some way is super powerful. It has so many applications, and particularly I've found around leaving feedback and things like that. Figma is awesome for that stuff. So collaborative design. The next one is brainstorming sessions in the same place. We do a lot of work together at my company, Ailo, like this, where we'll all be in the same file, jumping on a call, and just kind of working together on different ideas. Often what we do in our design process is we start on paper. So we would traditionally sketch things out. And then what I've liked to do since then is bring those sketches into Figma. So take a photo of them, bring them inside of Figma, and then we can sort of make comments about them and start sort of laying things on top of them and sort of building out prototypes that way. Live share, the ability to sort of follow somebody else's cursor. So you click their avatar and you can kind of watch what they do. It sounds a bit creepy, I know, but being able to sort of jump on a call and do this as well, though, is great. It's kind of a really easy way to get context for what people are trying to explain. I found in the past, often somebody will try and tell you what they're looking at or something like that, and you'll go in and you're looking at the completely wrong thing, and so you're giving feedback about the wrong artboard or whatever it might be, if there's different versions. So live share is really, really great. Handoff. So similar to sort of what Buzz talked about, but the idea of, you've got CSS directly in Figma. And so it's really great for developers to sort of come in, get their sort of sense of spacing and sizing of different elements from text to sort of colors, and then also just literally sort of, the border radius of elements and down to sort of that level of detail. So Figma does a really, really good job of that. And then the next one, handover. So if you are handing over files to other people in your business, having this kind of URL that you can share with people is super powerful as well. No more sort of sending of files and then trying to maintain different versions that people have, and somebody in another department coming back and saying, why isn't this right, but they're looking at the wrong file. So having that URL is great. File management and teams. So Figma sort of manages all of your files automatically. It's kind of within the app because it's web-based. And so no more sort of syncing version control issues with Dropbox or GitHub or whatever the tool is that you might use. And then lastly, I think the built-in commenting is another thing that I really love about Figma and something that we use quite a lot, particularly around feedback at Ailo. So pretty good use for that. So a couple of tools and tips. One of the things that we use, and this isn't just because this is Philippe's thing, but we have used wireframing quite a lot at Ailo, and we have completely adopted it as a tool. In general, I will say I'm not really a big fan of UI kits. It's not kind of the way that I like to design things. I find that UI kits often influence the way that I'll design UI. And so, in general, not a big fan of it. But for things like quick wireframing, for example, so that process I mentioned where we do paper sketches, and we'll bring those into Figma as photos. We can then pull some of the elements out of here and often sort of line them up, or if something's missing, we can add an element to it with the wireframing kit. And it's just a really quick and sort of easy way to get something up really, really fast. And then the other kit that I use quite a lot is just the iOS 12 GUI kit. That's only because a lot of my work is done in apps at the moment. So things like keyboards and header bars and nav bars, all of that kind of stuff. It's just nice to get the sizing. It's already done for you, particularly if you want to stick to some Apple conventions on your tab bars and things like that. Cool. So another plugin that we use. So I'm not too sort of deep into the plugin side of Figma. It's fairly new to me, but have been using a little bit recently. One of the plugins that I use obviously is Unsplash, really convenient. You don't have to go outside of Figma. You can just type in what you want and image. So that's really handy. And then the next one is remove.bg. So trying to sort of steer as clear of Photoshop as I can. And this is a great tool for sort of replicating essentially what the Magic Wand tool does in Photoshop. And keeps me, for the most part, out of Photoshop these days. Okay, so prototyping. So one thing I definitely didn't consider when switching to Figma was this aspect of it. I didn't really give it the credit that it probably deserved from a prototyping standpoint. I've used InVision and Marvel for years and been really happy with what they do. And so I didn't actually do this right away. This was kind of a little bit further down the line. But one thing that's great about the prototyping here is that there's no sort of version management. Again, it's kind of a theme, I suppose, that comes through with Figma, but these artboards are the prototype. So if you upload something to InVision, for example, and then you change the design, that's kind of out of date, and then you've got to re-upload it, and then you rename the file because your artboard changes name, and it's an annoying process. But if you use the prototyping within Figma, you don't have that problem anymore. And it kind of, just makes it a little bit nicer to do. Okay, design reviews and feedback. So although Scout's the best designer in my household, sometimes it's a little hard for him to communicate what he's thinking. And so it's important that you have sort of a good design review process and working remotely especially, there's bits that Figma can do to help you. But priority number one is just jump on a call. So if you need feedback about anything in particular, jump on a call, follow the person's cursor, let them talk through it, or you talk through it and somebody else will kind of help you. That's the easiest way to do it for sure. But we're a pretty small team. There's only 3 designers at my company at the moment, 1 in Sydney, 1 in Melbourne, and me at our sort of remote office. And so often it's not really convenient for us to be able to do that. People have meetings and other sort of things during the day, and so we can't necessarily always do that. So one thing that we've come up with is a marker system and comments. So we use markers. We've got a little library that we built with a set of markers, and they basically have different uses, but the one that we use the most is a please review marker. So it's pink, it says please review. You put it above the artboard that you need review on, and you can maybe leave some sort of comments to get things started. And then another person can go in and review that if you're not sort of available to talk right away, and then you can talk through it at a later time. Design team huddles. So this is probably the last but not least thing that we try and prioritize within my company. So obviously being a distributed team, it's important to sort of have these huddles as a design team, so you're a close, tight-knit unit to talk about different things. I couldn't find a photo of us ever having a huddle call, so this is kind of how it feels emotionally, I suppose. And so that's the best that I could do. But I think it's one thing that we do prioritize, and it's for the reason of both staying up to date on the tools. There's a lot of things in Figma that I still don't know and didn't know, the things that I learned recently. Like, for example, when you resize an artboard and like all of your symbols crush. I don't know if anybody's experienced that, and you just hold command and that doesn't do that anymore. I learned that the other day and I was like, my mind blew up. And so we talk about that kind of things at those kinds of things at our huddles. And sort of anything we learn, we try and sort of bring back in and sort of use Figma as our tool for doing a lot of that stuff. But changing tools is hard, so why should I try Figma? So I guess in summary, the reasons that I like Figma is, one, it's more convenient. It allows people to work together, so it's better for teams. And it's easier to share. So if you need to share it within your business with anyone, whether it be designers, marketers, developers, operations, it's one of those things where it's kind of it's such an easy thing to do that the value is there for sure. Cool. So that's a couple of little bits about why I love Figma. Any questions if anyone wants to ask? Open to them.
Do we have the mic? Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Hey, good, thanks. How are you?
I really like the way you create those tags, which are meant to tell the client or your customer like it's ready for review.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you able to create some kind of workflows? Because there are a lot of like iterations on that particular design. It might go for review, and it might be still pending for review, stuff like that.
Right.
So, how are you able to handle those workflows?
So I guess, so we have a full set of those markers. So one is please review, for example. One is review complete. One is more questions.
Okay.
And so we have a whole library of different kind of tags, I suppose you would call them. And so I guess if something doesn't necessarily feel right and you need to talk through it more, then maybe you'll leave some comments and you'll change that marker to be something else that's not quite finished. It's not, I've reviewed this and it's good to go. It's and traditionally that also, I should probably mention, that we've used that internally on a product team, not so much in an agency sort of setting with clients. So I don't know how it would go with them. I think it's definitely got legs, but I don't know, does that roughly answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Mic is over there as well.
Don't be shy, I won't throw it too hard. Throw it.
It's a really cool mic.
Yeah, go on.
Hey, I was wondering if you could share any feedback you get from developers about the things that they like or dislike about working with Figma.
Yeah, so I guess most of the feedback I've had has been very, very positive from developers. I write a little bit of code myself, but I wouldn't call myself a developer. But for my purposes, it's great. I mean, I'm probably biased there. But working with engineers in kind of a company setting where that's their dedicated role and that's kind of what they do, a lot of the feedback has been it's super easy to just get the stuff that we need and then get out. Oftentimes, like for the company that I work for at the moment, for example, we do use Storybook in the same way. But if something's being built, it's the ease of use that they're after, and a lot of the time Figma offers that, and so it's been really positive.
Great. Oh, I have a question here. Can you pass the mic to the guy next to you? Thanks.
Once you're done with a project, is there a specific way to export it straight into a site, or because the CSS is already set up based off what you've done? Is there an easier way to export it so that it goes straight? I don't know.
Like a generated site?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. I mean, I know there's other tools out there that'll do a similar thing, but I haven't found anything. So I don't know if anyone else has found that. Maybe that's worth answering. But me personally, I haven't found anything that does that. No.
Cool.
Quick, I have a question here. Do you think you can?
Okay. Can you pass it?
Yes.
Hey man,
Hey.
In terms of prototypes, like how much can you do with the prototypes? Can you do all this micro interaction within that app, or do you normally just bring it to another prototyping tools to that?
Yeah, I've switched my entire prototyping workflow over to Figma. It does things like it goes down into sort of, you can do overlays, for example. So you build a frame that's not necessarily like an iPhone size, and you can kind of overlay that in to do things like drop-down menus. So yeah, it has quite a lot of, it's pretty extensible. You can do quite a lot with it. Yeah, do you have any sort of micro interactions in mind that you were thinking of?
Even just those a parallax, for example, or just a. It's kind of like in Vision Studio allow you to do some of those stuff.
Yeah.
Just wondering whether are they kind of closer to just in Vision prototyping, or even Sketch can do just if it's just click a button and takes you to the next page.
Yeah.
If Sketch Sketch allows you to do that, right? So it's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain things that it can do, like if you set up the sort of horizontal scrolling and stuff, it can do bits of that. I'm not sure necessarily about parallax, for example.
Not like full on, just like,
Yeah, but it comes close, I suppose, and so depends what you want to do. I mean, like all those tools that I mentioned, like InVision, for example, is a great tool in its own right and has a lot of, especially InVision Studio, like there's a lot of reason to sort of use that as well, if you're after sort of that level of complexity and detail. But Figma, for the most part, gets me most of the way from where I need to be, especially if we're doing things like usability testing and so on. We get sort of most of the way there with Figma, so we've stuck with that.
Thanks. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thanks, Jonnie. Don't go away. Just stay on stage because we're gonna do the